Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rochalina.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast is brought to you by Holland Harnham Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland Harnham Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. I'm joined today by Andrea Biggs. Andrea is the Chief Executive of Balance, a small but growing organisation providing a range of services to vulnerable people that are designed to promote their independence and quality of life. What's unique about Andrea is how her own life experience, through growing up with a brother who has a disability, fueled her passion for pursuing a career in social care and empowering people with learning disabilities. And be sure to listen to the end, where Andrea shares with us how you can support the organisation and help people with learning disabilities and mental health issues in our local community. So whether you're interested in knowing more about the world of social services or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. Welcome, Andrea Biggs, to the Inside Kingston Podcast. Andrea, I'm really excited about this conversation because I think that the work that you guys do over there at Balance Support is really important, supporting vulnerable people, giving them a chance to achieve independence and a better quality of life. And I think that our listeners can learn a lot from your experience in this area. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So, Andrea, where did you grow up?
Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to come in and talk to you about balance, because I think we have got something very special, and I'm really happy to share that with the listeners as well. So I grew up in South Wales, and in a small village, and pretty normal upbringing. But I was brought up in a disabled family, so my brother has a disability, and I think that gives you quite a different perspective on life, and I think it makes you realise from a young age that not everybody is the same.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think, so I think from that's always given me that early drive.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I've got to put a shout out to that south part of Wales there. My wife and I still talk about a trip we did to the Three Peaks Bay. Around that part of the world. So beautiful. We happened to get great weather when we were there as well. It was just lovely. So it's awesome. I bet it's an awesome part of the world to grow up in. But
you were lucky with the weather.
Yeah, indeed. But I think the way you positioned your story there is really interesting, Andrea, and definitely a thread I want to pull further with you, of course, throughout this conversation. But just before we do so, so what did you study after secondary school?
So I went to Winchester University and actually studied a BA in learning disabilities.
Oh, right.
So that's where you understand obviously the theories behind it and the psychology and the theories around normalisation and things like that. So that was, as I said, like from a young age, I always kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do in some shape or form, is work with disabled people and just to improve their quality of life. So that drive was there from a very young age.
Yeah, that's incredible and incredible work. Could you tell us a little bit about your career journey before you started working at Balance?
Okay, so when I left university, I actually went to work for the National Autistic Society to work with their employment project called Prospects, and that was still at its infancy at that time, and so that was a really exciting job. So I was working in Islington and working right across London, supporting people with high-functioning autism to find and sustain paid employment, which was really exciting. For me, employment is such a key part of everybody's life, and no different if you have a disability. And it was a really exciting place to be at the time, and I'm sure still is. And so I worked there for about 6 years, I think. And then from there, I actually went to work for the Royal Borough of Kingston.
Oh, wow.
I moved over to Kingston from there, and because at the time I was actually renting in New Malden, so kind of knew the area and it seemed to make sense. And so I went to work for Kingston, and the brief at that stage was to set up a supported employment project for people with learning disabilities. So kind of going back a little bit to sort of what I trained to do. And that was really exciting because it was a blank piece of paper. It was kind of like, what do we need to do? How do we get this going? And so it was a really exciting challenge for me at the time. And so I went about doing that. And over time, I managed to ended up setting up an autism project as well, potentially because of my background and because some of the people that I used to support lived in the Kingston borough, and were sort of saying to me, well, why have we got to go all the way to Islington for that support when you're here? And obviously, so after several internal conversations, I was able to secure somebody to do that piece of work. And that was, again, really good and was a great project, because at the time, and still is very much the place that people with autism tend to fall between the cracks of services of people of learning disabilities and mental health, because sometimes they don't fit in either category. And so, and that is quite a challenge for statutory bodies of how to support. And so we sort of filled that gap in Kingston for many years. And then we also secured external funding from the European Union to support people with mental health conditions into employment as well.
Wow.
And we were working in GP surgeries in Kingston to work alongside the practices to support people who maybe were off sick from work and off sick for long periods of time. And maybe it was actually underlying mental health issues, maybe particularly at a primary level. And we were there to try and support the patients to give them the confidence to return to work. So when I was in the Royal Borough of Kingston, they were my three main projects, with a heavy focus around employment.
That's really interesting. And Andrea, it's funny because you mentioned something there, which is in between the lines, is the difficulty sometimes in even families accepting a disability or a mental health condition in their family, in their immediate family. I think, and I'd like to hear from you on this, that we are very much turning the page, maybe gradually, maybe slowly, but turning the page on this business of a stigma around this. I can say for myself that, I work in finance. It's quite a male sort of alpha dominated industry, and financial planning as a profession, wealth management, again, probably just still is like that to a certain extent. But even so, over this last year in particular, and I would say, especially from guys and girls like me, the next generation into the profession, there is no stigma whatsoever in talking about mental health, in talking about how one is feeling just because of circumstances and family life, the way that's going. There's study groups in the profession that are offering help to members of the profession in that way. Of course, what you're talking about is something a lot more formal, and perhaps that requires more trained support than what I'm talking about. But is it your understanding as well that we are slowly turning the page, and that people not only are more aware of the fact that, this is part of life, mental health conditions that sometimes come and go, sometimes are with us forever, sometimes are diagnosed later in life, they're here to stay. And we as a society need to be thinking about how to support that for the benefit of the individual and also for the benefit of society, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the fact that the media and celebrities and, the royal family are now all talking about it and promoting it is fantastic. I think it is scratching the surface a little bit. And I think it's great to be talking about it. And obviously it's making people come forward for more support. But I'm not convinced that the support is always there from services, or not even services, just it's good to talk, and that's really healthy. But actually, a lot of people need a lot more than just talking, and I think that we're going to see that coming post-COVID is frightening. I know that the government are pumping a lot more money into mental health services, and I think rightly so. It does feel to me, though, it is scratching the surface a little bit, and it does worry me that there's a lot more to come. So I'm not sure that's the answer as such. I guess it's good that it's definitely out there more, and it's being covered in mainstream programs on the telly, and you can't get away from it. I mean, even my child at 8, he's learning about things in school. I mean, it's great. But I think when somebody has a severe and enduring mental health problem, that's a lot more than just talking, and actually I think the stigma of, that we see on the news where somebody with a mental health problem commits a serious crime, I'm not sure we're removing any stigma around that group of people at all.
Yeah. No, that's important that you highlight that. It really is. And Andrea, to bring this conversation to the present, could you tell us a little bit about the work that Balance Support does today?
Yeah, so Balance is a charity. We were a social enterprise. And so actually it's probably important to just give you a little bit of history of Balance to place it. So as I said, I work for the Royal Borough of Kingston. And in 2013, what I did with the 3 main projects that I described earlier is created Balance from them. So we're what we call a spin-out organisation. So we're completely independent from Kingston, but we did spin out from them. So I led that spin out with 17 staff at the time, including myself. I 2P'd us into this new entity, which was a community interest company, and created Balance. So at the time we were delivering those 3 services I described. And since then we've grown quite significantly. We generally, though, the customer is a person with a learning disability, and so we have a residential care home in Surbiton. We offer supported living right across the borough, and that's a mixture of people living together as housemates, to somebody living in their own flat, to somebody living with their parents with the ambition to move out and be independent. And so we we'll go in and teach them how to use the washing machine, how to cook a meal from scratch, how to budget, etc., depending on the support plan. We also we rent space off Hampton Court, and we have a garden nursery down there, which is absolutely beautiful, where people come for like their day service. So we have like chickens down there. We had a woodwork shop. We do arts and crafts, but the space that we have is beautiful, and you've got deers roaming around outside our gate, and we've got bikes down there, so they go bike riding, and we have a companion bike, so maybe somebody who has mobility issues and couldn't ride a mainstream bike can get alongside the bike, maybe with their friend who they attend stud nursery with, and go for a ride around the park, which is lovely. We also we still provide the employment service for people with mental health conditions, and we provide a independent travel training program. So we support younger people with a disability who possibly attend mainstream school but get allocated a bus to pick them up in the morning and take them home at night, which is quite stigmatising for people. And actually travelling along with your mates on the bus is a really important part of secondary school life. Huge. And so we provide travel training support. So one of our staff will go and meet somebody at their house at 7:00 in the morning and travel train them to their school, and then meet them at the end of the day and travel train them at home. And that usually takes about 6 weeks in total, on a one-on-one, for them to be signed off that program, and then they travel independently.
That's really interesting.
So I think that's sort of, it's grown, and we've just celebrated our 8th year this year.
Wow.
in as Balance, and it's been quite a milestone. And I guess one of the big reasons why I was quite interested in doing this podcast is obviously to tell the story and the fabulous work that Balance does, but also it's kind of a nice sign off, because I've actually recently resigned from my position at Balance, and that's been a really difficult decision, because Balance is very important to me, and it is like my third child. But I think I need a new challenge, and I think it would be great for Balance to have a change as well, and a change of leadership. So it's been a really difficult decision, but I think it's an important one. And selfless one, really, to make. And so it's a great, the timing is great, I think, for this in some ways like that.
For sure. And Andrea, I've got no doubt that not only your work throughout this whole period in which you decoupled from Kingston and built this with your team. I've got no doubt that you've left the organization in a way that will hopefully keep thriving going forward. So massive hats off to you for the work that you and your team have put and through your leadership up until this point. And Andrea, I'm keen to also explore a little bit further for our listeners who would be interested in supporting Balance. Some of our listeners, of course, are local residents, other are not only local residents, but local business owners. How could they go about in supporting the organization and the causes that the organization champions?
So there's a few ways, really. As I said, we did convert into a charity. So obviously, we hope that the new CEO will come in and develop a fundraising strategy so people can, choose us as their local organisation that they may want to support in a financial way, or even if they're a local employer, they may like to choose us as their charity of the year, for example. That would be fabulous. But also, if an individual thinks, well, maybe I can't offer financial assistance, but actually I'm a great gardener and I enjoy working alongside people, we would welcome volunteers to come down to our stud nursery, to come and work alongside our staff and the people who come and use our service and share their knowledge with us. That would be great. I mean, you can imagine this time of year when we've got sunshine and then lots of rain, it's a big job to try and keep on top of the maintenance and the gardening at our stud nursery. But also we have a community cafe that we run in Surbiton. We did have a more of a commercial cafe in Kingston Adult Education Centre pre-COVID. But since COVID has come, that's been closed down. And so we've restarted a community cafe. At the moment, it's quite a small thing, but it's in a church in Surbiton. And I think we're only into our 5th week of that. But, people can just come along and come and support us by meeting their friends there for a coffee and some nice homemade cake and just being there. So I think there's a number of different ways. And from an employer's point of view, if you're interested in employing disabled people or giving people an opportunity and interested in exploring that, we'd be very happy to come and speak to any potential employers and also support you in that journey and how to make those adaptations, what to do. It's okay that, like you say, if somebody's got a mental health problem, to ask them about that, and we can support that and mediate that conversation. There's lots of different ways, I think, that people locally can support us.
That's fabulous. And only because you mentioned it, Andrea, I'm curious, how has the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns that ensued, how has that affected your organization? And what have you been able to do to keep in touch with the folks and the businesses that support the causes that you guys, of course, champion so well in the area?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really difficult, as with any organisation, and it's obviously everyone's been touched by it. So we're no different to that. But I think, 2 of our services are 24/7. So actually, when the world stopped back in, March 2020, we couldn't, there was no choice, and staff were scared. We're genuinely scared, to come into work. Bearing in mind, we have staff who have to travel across London to get to us. And so it was a really scary time. And we did have, unfortunately in our care home, we did have some cases of positive cases, people being discharged from the hospital early those days when actually we didn't really know, people weren't being tested before they were coming home. And so, and some of our staff did contract it as well. Thankfully, we got through all that and no fatalities and no serious illnesses. But I think, it's just about supporting our staff and from the sidelines as well, because obviously I couldn't go in. I mean, I remember I was going in weekly and I would just stand at the door and just speak to anybody who was coming to the door just to try and show them that the management team hadn't disappeared. We were still there as much as we could be, and making sure, those early days around PPE was a real challenge. Sure. I mean, I had my whole family looking out for me. Everyone who I knew was just looking out for me, from friends who were dentists to, just trying to get some protection to our frontline staff. Because I think often social care, is kind of second behind NHS, and we're not in a hospital, so it's a different setting, but equally we were supporting very vulnerable people who were obviously some of them are quite elderly as well, and if they were to get this, it could be fatal. So it was really tricky, and obviously when you're working alongside people with learning disabilities, they didn't really understand what was going on. When you've got somebody with autism whose verbal communication is limited, and suddenly their routine has been completely thrown because they're no longer going to the day service that they've been going to for their entire adulthood, 4 days a week, people were upset.
Yeah.
And and we had to actually knock around all the local neighbours and explain, it's going to be quite noisy. We're really sorry. People are quite upset, and this is the way they're verbalising it.
Yeah.
And we're trying to support people the best we can, but actually it was tricky. And so for people that we supported out in the community in terms of living in their own homes, we look through everybody. I mean, we support about 80 people out in the community in their own homes. So we would look at the people who had no other support but us and prioritise them and try and support them as much as we can, through the use of telephones. But some people who we support don't have internet at home. So it wasn't just about getting a tablet to them or a smartphone. It was a lot more than that. And then they didn't know how to use it when we got them things. So, over time, we've been managed to get some tablets and we've got some SIM cards for people. So we've given it them. But some people just don't want that. And sometimes people say to me, do you think that a lot of the work that we do now will stay? And I think some of it might, but ultimately, I think humans are social beings. Okay, we like social contact, but somebody with a learning disability who lives on their own, because that's great, they've got independence, but actually their independence and their social network is going out to the local cafe every day and having lunch there every single day, because they know the people who work in that cafe and they are their friends. And it took, and that example did happen, and we didn't realise, and that person was not eating a hot meal because the cafe had obviously closed because it had to, and we didn't realise that was going on. And so, and then obviously we were providing meals when we realised.
Yeah.
But, I think the people with learning disabilities, they need people in their lives. They need that social contact, and it's a vital part. And I think if we cut that off, I worry that we're returning to the sort of more institutional sort of types of support, which isn't, as far as I'm concerned, right in this day and age. So
absolutely.
So it was a really challenging time, and and continues to be on times. And I just hope we can return to some sort of more normal in the near future.
Well, look, Andrea, I was very keen to have this conversation with you on the podcast, because I really do think that the work that you guys do, the work that folks do in the social services sector, is noble work. And you very eloquently described just how tricky, how important, how vital this is if we as a society want to continue to be proud of where we've arrived as a society. We definitely need to be hearing about this from the front line, like you very kindly shared that with us. And also, we all the listeners that are with us here up until this point, dig deep and let's figure out how we can support causes like that, because it's important. And, we might not be able to support causes around the whole of England, around the whole of the world, but we can all do something locally to support these causes. And hopefully other people in their own neighborhoods, in their own countries, do the same thing. And that just skews the picture to something that's a little bit better, a little bit more something that we can all be proud of as a society. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Andrea. Thank you very much. And of course, Andrea, you have a lot of experience in this sector, but also in roles that require you to manage teams that are dealing with a lot of responsibility, a lot of difficult issues. What are some of the key business lessons that you've learned throughout your life?
So I think relationships, full stop, is really important, whether that's be with my immediate team or with our stakeholders, just treat people as you would want to be treated. So, for example, if you get an email from somebody, it takes 30 seconds to respond and say thank you, or just acknowledging it. And I think that sometimes that gets forgotten about. And I think, those relationships go a long way. But I also think I like to think that I walk the walk as well as talk the talk, so it would be nothing for me to turn up at one of our services and actually be, an hour downstairs chatting to people who actually receive that service for us before I go into the meeting, because actually that's it. Ultimately those people pay our salaries, and actually this is that is what gets me out of bed in the morning, not to sit down and look at the strategic plan. Actually the people who receive a service for us, seeing people happy, seeing people progress, that's what makes my day. And, and all through COVID as well, going in once a week and just trying to make sure that I am seeing people is really important. So I think, there's all those things, but also, it's hard being the chief exec of an organisation, because you do have to make difficult decisions. And, I think many people don't see the full picture like you do, and you have to see the full picture. And it can sometimes go against the grain, because in an ideal world, you would want to, give annual pay rises every year. But actually, if the contracts that we are delivering don't give uplifts, then we can't pass it on. And so that's a difficult one at times to handle. But I think the transparency and the honest, way is the best way to be. And like I said, you do have to make difficult decisions. And I just think you can be transparent, and many people still won't like the decision. But you would like to think they might look back and understand at a later point that actually, some of the things that we do are for the greater good and for the people that we're supporting. And so, and I think you mature quite quickly. I think when you're doing this type of role, and you kind of learn that you just have to hold on to the beliefs and the values, I think, and that drives you forward.
For sure.
But I think the key thing for me is about relationships, though.
Yeah, I'm with you. Relationships and communication have been vital to our business, especially over these last 12 to 15 months. We're recording now in June, hopefully coming to the end of this COVID lockdown period. But nonetheless, I strongly second what you said there. Sometimes it's hard to be honest and clear in your communication, but it pays dividends in the long run, even if in the way that you described there, sometimes not in the ideal way, but I think it works best for everybody. So I strongly second that for sure.
Yeah.
When you look back at your career journey to date, what are you most proud of?
There's probably lots of little pockets from literally, when I think back to my early career, finding somebody who's got autism, whose behaviours sometimes could be regarded as quite challenging, to find them a job, was just amazing at that time. And just, the thrill and the independence that gave that individual is just, you can live off that success for ages. So it's fantastic. But then, obviously from a bigger point of view, just setting up and establishing balance, and actually 8 years down the line to be saying, we're still here and we're still going strong, and we've come through the other end, hopefully, of COVID, because there's some organisations who were spin outs who haven't made it through for various different reasons. We've had some dark days and it's been hard on times, but I think holding on to our values and our ethos and what we're about and why we're doing what we're doing has got us through that. And I think that, my team at Balance, they're strong, they're experienced, we have a great culture, very supportive of each other. And naturally, you might think that because of the work that we do, but that's not always the case. But actually, I think we have something special at Balance like that, that people are in it for the right reasons. But I think, so that's probably is probably the biggest, and as I said, even though I am now stepping down from that position, can't take that away. You know, what I've learned from that experience is just phenomenal, really. You know, those early days when you're, you know, coming up with contracts of employment with a little bit of support from a lawyer, when you sat down with lawyers negotiating, you know, big contracts and writing tenders and, you know, doing anything and everything in between just to get this organisation off the ground and running. You know, it's been a fantastic learning experience, and I obviously must have done something right.
Absolutely.
I'm concluded.
Well, and look, from like I mentioned before, all the work that you and your team have done up until this point, you know, granted, hopefully we're now coming to the end of this COVID time. It sounds like it's exciting times ahead for Balance, for sure.
I think so. I think it's a great opportunity, and I will be involved in the recruitment. You know, we've got a great board at Balance, and they're really clear on the direction that we're going and what we need and what we need, you know, moving forward. And I have every faith in them to make that right decision. And like I said, and I've told them all I'll be watching. So, but you know, I think you know it's good timing, and 8 years is a good time to sort of say, I think you've had the best of me now.
Absolutely, that's brilliant. Well, as we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So, Andrea, what do you do to relax outside of the office?
We have a static caravan down on the Kent coast.
Oh, lovely.
And at times that's been like a lifesaver, particularly in the last few years. But generally, it's just nice to physically go away. And I love the seaside. And so that's been lovely. And I think and I have a young family, so it's just nice to sort of physically remove yourself a little bit. And I think, yeah, so that helps me relax.
Very cool. And are there any books that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
Do you know, I go through phases of reading lots of books, and then I stop. I tend to read more sort of not necessarily work related books, some, you know, something more escapism sort of things. So I don't think I can recommend anything. I have recently bought a book that is written by an autism woman, and it's called Unbroken, and I'm yet to start it. It's on my bedside because I will be starting it. But sometimes I find when you're working all day, actually it's nice to switch off completely at the end of the day and not read anything related. But I watched the author on a podcast actually, and thought I need to buy that book. So I quickly jumped on and bought it. But so there's nothing in particular, I don't think. Yeah. I think for me, it's escapism.
And are there any movies or TV shows that you've recently watched that you would recommend to our listeners?
So I'm not one of these massive box set friends. I don't seem to set people. I don't seem to have the time. And when people tell me that they watch, I'm fascinated about where they find the time.
Detail.
I almost think by 10 o'clock, I can hardly keep my eyes open, let alone really concentrate on a long program. But I guess what I quite like is like the BBC sort of dramas and there's been like a bit of a run of those of late. Obviously, Line of Duty and is it Packed and things like that. So I quite like watching them, and I think we probably watch more mainstream telly rather than Sky and things. But,
and with the iPlayer, it's easy to dip in and out of it as well, isn't it? So it's pretty good in that way.
Exactly. So if you've missed it because you've been, you've been doing something else, you can just like catch back up on it, and that's quite good.
That's very good. And finally, where can people go to find out more about the organisation, about Balance?
So on our website would be the best place. So that's www.balancesupport.org.uk. We're quite active on Twitter as well, so you can follow us on Twitter. I think our handle's Balance Support. Make contact with us through that. There's an email address info box that comes into us. We'd be happy to speak to people if they're interested in volunteering or interested from an employer's point of view, wants to know more about how they can maybe adapt their processes to more disability friendly. We'd be more than happy to speak to people. And
for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure that I add those links to the show notes. Andrea, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
Thank you very much.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.